But for those of you here, welcome. This is the first of our summer series around AutoQA. Not so much the product, but more about all those strategic logistical issues that people tend to bump into along the way. So for people who haven't met me before, I'm Vicky. I work in the marketing team here at EvaluAgent. I usually lurk backstage at these things. So this time I'm sharing the spotlight with Chris, who is our legendary.
That's a bit of a change.
Yeah, I used to like it's not used to like me being here right at the start with you. So I'm Vicky. I normally live backstage, but I have the pleasure today of speaking to Chris. Chris, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. So my name's Chris Mounce, and I'm the product training and enablement specialist here at EvaluAgent. So I'm immersed in EvaluAgent every day, running auto QA, running things like demoware so that we can present and see how EvaluAgent performs in the best possible way. So really excited to talk about these mistakes. Mistakes, that sounds negative.
Let's like we'll address the mistakes and help other people
Yeah.
overcome them. But we do it's good. It's good. We'll talk about a mistake. That's fine. We're very conscious of time, right? So these summer sessions are designed to be short, sharp, succinct, get you energized after your lunch hours and give you something good to take away with you. So we won't linger very long. We are already 2 minutes past the hour, and I'm just going to end this poll. And quickly, we've got a good idea now of the kind of maturity that we've got. And actually, it's quite spread, Chris.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I don't think that was a massive surprise because auto QA is a journey. It's not just one thing that you start and that's it. So it makes sense that people are at different stages in that journey.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, what we'll do with this information is like we've got the 6 mistakes that we're going to walk through, and what we'll try and do is pitch to, kind of different maturities that we've got on today's webinar and see if we can't help all of you out at least a little bit. So brilliant. Shall we get into it?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Right. So mistake number one, 100% coverage before your framework's ready. So, Chris, this is actually before you've even touched technology, before you're even kind of getting into the like building and setup. Talk to me about this. What mistake is this all about? Like, what do people do here?
So yeah, I think this is important that it is the number one, the first mistake that we're going to talk about because when we talk about auto QA, 100% coverage is the aim. With auto QA, you can achieve 100% coverage, and you absolutely can. But that coverage for me is a capability. It's not a strategy in its own right. Because if you score everything, if you just turn it on and let it go, and you're scoring everything with what's potentially an unvalidated criteria, then yeah, you'll get 100% coverage, but probably 100% noise rather than any sort of kind of real insight. And the thing is, with auto QA, it's publishing at scale instantly. And that's one of the kind of big things to keep in mind, I think.
If you've got any kind of gremlins in your QA framework to begin with, like that's only going to actually scale across 100% of your interactions.
Yeah, you need to have trust. And that's the critical thing when it comes to auto QA. That's so important because the automation that scales fast. And the problem there is that trust breaks fast as well. And if you have a branch of scores that are produced by auto QA that are ultimately incorrect, then your program's going to suffer reputational damage right at the beginning and undo all of the good work that's been done up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely in fitting with our title of derailing an auto QA program, but before it's even started, really. So how, I mean, so the second half of our title of this webinar is how to avoid them. So Chris, like what do people do here? Like what's the groundwork they need to lay? What are the foundations? What needs to be in play to make it a success?
It's taking it easy, I guess. Start with a sample of conversations. It doesn't need to be 100%, but take a sample and run your scoring through that. Validate those results, and then widen the net from there. And I was laughing about this earlier on because I was thinking about the rabbit and the tortoise. It's kind of the same thing here. The teams that go the slowest at the start, they go fastest overall. So it's kind of like the tortoise and the rabbit sort of analogy.
Oh, absolutely, because they're not having to unpick the mistakes and stuff where they've tried to move too far. But it's very tempting, isn't it? Like you're excited about auto QA, you want to roll it out really fast. Like so yeah. So actually doing
Yeah,
something slowly with intention, that sounds like a better plan.
100%. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. speeding on, I think, quickly. We've got lots of content to cover. And actually, I'll just take this opportunity to say if there's any commentary you want to add in the chat, if there are questions that you want us to pick up, like we'll probably take those more towards the end, make sure we've covered most of the content. But please do be using the chat to bring our attention to things as we go along. So, mistake 1 down, on to mistake 2. Not defining your desired outcomes. This is actually quite a nice segue from the previous one. So, like, you've got your kind of intentions. You've set your intentions of like, we want AutoQA and we're going to run a pilot or we're going to run a kind of closed group and such. But something that we see is that people maybe get a bit excited about the technology and its potential, but they're not necessarily looking at the actual, maybe the bigger picture. So talk to me a bit more about this.
I think that's the big mistake where you switch AutoQA on fully automated just because you can. But if you do that and there's no sort of kind of clear decision about what you're turning it on for, that's where there's a potential issue. Because the way that I think about this is that the automation in the platform is arriving at the answer to the question that hasn't really been asked yet. And the problem there is that it's going to give you that noise into your reporting and no real insight. So if you think about an objective, that's ultimately the decision that's going to the scores feed. Are you coaching for development? Is it compliance assurance? Is it CX insight? Each one of those is potentially a different scorecard with different audiences and measuring different elements of success.
At this stage, are we thinking like, well, I want to improve AHT by this much, or I want to see this many more coaching sessions happen? Are we getting down into metrics, or are we kind of talking, I want to be able to talk to other departments because we know that these things are failing because we can see it in AutoQA, or is it all of the above? Like, what kind of desired outcomes should people be looking to define?
I mean, one of the things to think about, I guess, is that AutoQA is not going to create a quality standard that's amplifying your own at scale. So your objectives are going to evolve over time, and that standard will as well. And the thing with AutoQA, you're able to use the insight that comes out of that to identify what needs to be worked on and how to get to that, what good looks like ultimately. Because we were talking about this yesterday, it's very easy to identify what bad looks like. Identifying what good looks like, that's the kind of difficulty. So probably if there is a difficulty understanding exactly what your aims are, understand what you don't want to see. And then as your AutoQA starts to run and scale up, you can identify those things and then see quite easily what needs to change and develop, and then evolve the kind of criteria and the objectives based on that.
And that's actually why point 1 is so important as well, isn't it? If you're setting up slowly, then you can actually define and tune these outcomes that you're looking for a little bit more, because you know what it looks like. You can see it in the platform. You can see like what's giving you red, what's giving you green, and so on.
And the thing is, the human element plays a massive part in this as well, because ultimately it's the humans in the loop that's going to be validating these results. So calibration, making sure your evaluators are calibrated in the right way with those standards, that's so important, so that any validation that gets done, you can have confidence in that as well.
Absolutely. So our fix here really, I guess, is like following on from that, starting slowly is, you need to have something in mind, like what is it that you want to get out of your AutoQA and what you want to learn and what you want to use it for, but not just that, like be open-minded that, that might change, that, that fine-tuning is going to be important.
Yeah, I mean, I guess before getting into the configuration of anything, write down what decision each scorecard is feeding into, and what's more importantly, what's going to change if those scores move, and then the calibration piece as well. So I guess those three, that's the facts.
Absolutely. So we've opened with 2 quite heavy hitters there, haven't we? They're quite kind of strategic, lots of foundation and groundwork. So I think we've covered that one.
They're the kind of most common, I would say.
Oh, well, I'm glad we've covered those off at the top of the call. So let's move on to number 3. Chris, expecting AutoQA to work out of the box instantly. So now we are starting to get more into tinkering and configuration here. Talk to me about this.
this is another interesting one because it's very easy to have that expectation where it's an out of the box instant sort of kind of thing that you can turn on and it'll do its magic and it's all perfect. I think all of us had that expectation with AI as we've started to kind of ramp up with it over the past couple of years. But ultimately, as we've seen how these tools develop and how we use them and how we use them to get the best out of it, when we think about AutoQA, that's essentially an evaluator that follows your instructions literally. And any sort of kind of misses that makes, early misses, those are essentially design feedback. It's not ultimately AI failure. Because if you think about it this way, where if we are starting in the early phases, say weeks 1 to 4 of AutoQA, and we're running that kind of configuration piece, reading every miss as a refinement, that's the opportunity. It's not this is failing, this is not working. If we're expecting instant magic, where any misses in those cases, those are then termed as these are failures, this isn't working. And then the program dies of reputational damage before anything's actually happening with it. And it comes back to that trust thing as well.
This seems like a tough thing to get right. Like, how do people at kind of different stages of their auto QA journey? Well, I suppose actually we're talking more to people here, aren't we, that are perhaps taking their first steps into auto QA. How do we sidestep that mistake? Like, how do we make sure that, is it managing expectations internally? Like, what is it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's important that those expectations are set because, when we're talking about fancy new tech, right away you're thinking, oh, this will be amazing right from the get-go and be up and running. It's like a black box that does everything for us. But you need to have trust in it and you need to be confident when you're able to scale up. So one of the ways that we see that is really successful is running it as a pilot. So go through your configuration, your testing, your validation as a pilot while your usual QA runs so that you're still answering to the business, those figures are still being reported in. Meanwhile, you're developing this pilot program that when it's ready to go, when you've run all of those checks, that's when you see the benefits.
Right. So like running it in tandem actually to begin with is brilliant actually, because you don't want to just turn off your old process and then turn it on. It's all going to magically work. There's not going to be, any problems, like anything like that. Like having them both running concurrently to start with gives you that nice segue into it, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where if you're reporting to stakeholders, they will be used to seeing numbers in a particular way, the old way. So it's important that that sort of kind of maintained as the new style is transitioned in because it's going to be a lot more insight. And I guess you need to be ready for that level of insight because once you know there's something that needs to change, you kind of need to do something about it at that point because you know.
Absolutely. You don't want AutoQA to just be a kind of tick box exercise. You want to actually be collecting all of this amazing data and doing something with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise, what's the point? It is just a tick box. And if it's a tick box, improvement's never going to happen because you're just doing it for the ticky boxness of it.
Well, exactly. So we have had a question come through in the the ticky bockness of it. We're going to add that to the evaluation glossary. We will typically take questions at the end, but I think this is a good one from Craig Baker. How long would you typically think it takes to be fully competent or confident that what you are doing is correct? So there is like a second half of that question, but while you're mulling that over, Chris, going from day one and building the Gen AI or text questions today, question mark. I can write you something to do that in 5 minutes from the various companies and people who use AutoQA. So what do you think in terms of like, from day one, you've got your technology, you've got your software up to feeling like you're doing things accurately, successfully, leveraging the platform? I mean, a part of me wants to say it depends, but what do you think?
Yeah, it's subjective. I mean, putting a number on it is very difficult, and the reasons for that is there's different levels of, I guess, technical capability when it comes to prompt writing. And Craig, I know you'll have experience in writing prompts, etc. But that's been a whole change in the way that we think about giving evaluators instructions, because that's ultimately what we're doing when we're writing prompts and when we're writing instructions. Those are AutoQA evaluator instructions. And traditionally, when we give human evaluators instructions, there's a lot of stuff in there that they know what you mean. Ultimately, if we're talking about did the agent show empathy, any QA evaluator should have a good understanding as to what that looks like in real life. An AI takes it very literal. So your capability and how to write those prompts is a factor. Now, having said that, the technology is changing where there's support and there's aid and there's tools to help you write prompts. Most recently we introduced the line item builder, where it's an assistant that you tell it what you need to measure, and that will give you your prompts and your instructions that you can then take through that testing phase. So the process is sped up massively. But I would say it depends very much on what you're measuring, how much you're measuring as well. I've seen in the past scorecards that are measuring everything plus one. The question needs to be then at that point, are all of these things needed? Are they relevant? Because then we can cut it back and focus on the things that are making a difference to the business. So I guess, Craig, long story short, it depends on all of those elements. On the basis of being able to write those prompts and getting good testing results out of it, I would probably give it a kind of 8-week marker, but there's a lot of variables within there. I hope that's covered it.
That's a great question, Dave. Thank you. And for anyone else who has questions, do please pop them in the chat. We are approximately halfway, so I am going to move us on. Chris, I think that this is a kind of mistake that we probably don't need to linger on long, but leaving agents out can impact adoption. So talk to me about this, but it's one of those ones I did want to call attention to, but it can get overlooked, right?
I think so. I mean, I think the more certainly I've saw the trend and noticed the trend over the past couple of years where agents are being involved in these processes, because I think it was more, and it's probably by design, where it was spreadsheets that were doing QA on and things like that. It was very difficult to have agents involved in the process. They were almost a byproduct, and we know the challenges there where they disengage. It's a tick box exercise, but getting agents involved in the process is more about transparency and fairness. Because there's a really interesting bit of research that was done, Vicky, where it was found that people accept the outcomes that they disagree with if, and this is a big if the process feels fair. So if they're getting input into those decisions at the beginning, then that's going to increase acceptance, even when maybe not the most favourable outcome. And it makes sense when you think about it. If I know the process, it's almost like a fair cop.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose it helps eradicate some of that you only picked my worst calls in some ways. If you've taken them on the journey and you've explained how it works and why it's being set up the way that it is, and ultimately what your desired outcomes are and the framework that it's based on and all the stuff that we've already talked about, if you've taken them on that journey, then, like you say, in a way, fair is fair.
Yeah, and it's empowerment as well. If you're giving them access to their data and letting them see the insight for themselves, the ownership that they can then take, it makes coaching conversations completely different. Let them see their own data.
Just good, just brilliant. I am going to move us on from this one, because really the fix is take them on the journey, bring them into the pilots, make sure it's not just your exceptional agents, but the ones that perhaps struggle with development as well. You want a breadth of feedback from them. Have I missed anything there, Chris, before I do move us along?
I think just to kind of finish off on that point, QA, I think, traditionally does have that bad rap. I mean, I'm on a subreddit of all things, and it's focused on contact centers and QA, and the bad rap that it gets is real. So that goes a long way to mitigating that, because it's not about Big Brother and not about checking. It is about development. The measurement, that's one part of it. What you do with that measurement in order to improve and then bring it back and get a better result next time. We could talk all day, but that's
all of these mistakes could justify their own webinar, frankly. Yes, the Big Brother thing certainly does come up a lot on contact center subreddits. I've seen it a fair amount as well. This one actually leads quite nicely on from the agent conversation. So scoring for compliance not coaching. Now we talked a lot about this, Chris and I, as we were kind of prepping for this webinar, and this is such a big topic. So it is going to be a challenge for us to kind of lock this one down and cover it in a couple of minutes. But there's just so much scope with AutoQA, isn't there? And in some ways, the compliance can be a pass fail, a yes, no, did they or did they not? But if you're only focusing on that, people are missing out, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we see a scorecard and let's say for talking sake, there's 10 questions on it and it is pass fail, yes, no, like a binary result. There's no movement in there. There's no way to differentiate between a pass that is exceptional or one that's just barely passed and no more. All of that insight is just being lumped into the one outcome. And ultimately that kind of measurement, and it is appropriate for your compliance type questions. Did they confirm ID and V? Did they read a compliance statement? Those measurements, though, are ultimately, if all of that is tied into just a yes, no, all you're going to get at the other end of that is reports. You'll get the reports on that. You won't so much get results. And getting results, it means introducing a scale. So rather than a pass fail, have a kind of sliding scale where you can measure exactly, and this is more related to your soft skill sort of kind of questions, but you can measure exactly where they are in that scale and coach from it. So if I'm getting a score where I'm just scraping past, then I know that there's something to work on, and that process and that development can be worked on through that as well. So I think that's I see that a lot with scorecards where loads of questions, it's just yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Compliance questions fine, but those coaching and those soft skills, the ones that make that customer experience unforgettable, because we've all spoken to an agent or had some sort of message or a live chat where that's been exceptional. Those are the ones that you remember. I guess we need to remember to feed that back in cases as well, because we're always quick to give negative feedback with these things. But yeah, at this point, I'm rambling.
Oh, no, not at all. And actually something that we touched on in our preparations was the idea that if you're so heavily focused on compliance that your agents, who are ultimately like one of your brand ambassadors and a key touch point for people getting in touch, they can sound a bit robotic if there's no kind of grey scale in between the black and white.
Yeah, that's the thing. If all it is, if all they need to do is meet a yes no criteria, there is that risk where it's robotic, and we've made jokes about that in the past. And actually, talking about Reddit again, I saw a post where, and it's not a good example actually, but this agent was demonstrating how effective speaking like a robot would be in order to get the customer off the phone and get a positive QA outcome. So it's like that is unbelievable because it's could argue it's game in the system, but
In the system, yeah,
yeah. But
absolutely. Oh, wow. And I guess it's like, just to wrap this up, um, there's also, if you're only focusing on compliance, there's a whole host of kind of nuances that you might be missing in your data as well. That, like if you're only doing yes, no, pass, fail, there's a whole kind of scope of opportunity and potential with your auto QA program that you might, just
yeah,
not be seeing. We likened it to, turning from black and white TV into color. Like there's nuance to those things.
absolutely. Because that's the thing, as an agent, if I'm getting a fail result, for example, then that's going to have a much more negative effect than me getting a coach outcome, as an example, on the basis of how I handled that conversation. And I can do a lot more with coach. I can understand that there's a development, but in those cases where that failure criteria is absolutely laid out, then that's the fair result to get. But it's important that you're essentially matching the measurement, the purpose. So I think binary for compliance checks and scaled for coaching type behaviours. I think that's the kind of key takeaway there.
Absolutely. And there's your fix. So we are going to move on to the last mistake. And I can see that we've got a question in the chat, and I do want to do both before we wrap up. This is a huge topic, Chris. So we are literally going to be scraping the surface, but ignoring your AI agent interactions. If you are running AI agents and you have an auto QA program, you cannot let these things like sit separately. Like, tell me why.
Well, that's been these days, like with AI agents, chatbots, virtual assistants, whatever they're called, they're handling more and more interactions, on a daily basis. And really, most QA frameworks don't have any criteria for them. And there's a huge risk there because on the face of it, if you're running AutoQA on your agents, your human agents, and everything looks great, you're getting high scores, positive results, excellent. But let's say you look at Trustpilot as an example, and then you see the reality where here's an issue with this chatbot. I've been stuck in a loop. It gave me wrong information. It didn't give me what I need. What a joke this chatbot is. Those are real things that you then see, and that's pain that customers can feel. And if we're not measuring those through this same, using AutoQA technology, it presents a huge risk. You don't have to go very far, Vicky, to find horror stories with chatbots going wrong. And I mean, just a quick Google, you can see all of these viral sort of kind of elements where look what this chatbot's done. It swore at me. I've managed to get it to recite Python code. I've managed it to. There was one where it was convinced to sell a car for like $1. And it's
Yes.
like these things become viral because they're yes, they're hilarious, but the serious side to it, there's reputation damage, there's compliance issues, there's fines that we've seen as a result of wrong information being given. So it's critical that we're on top of these bot interactions. And the reason that it's so important, aside from that, is human agent makes a mistake on a conversation. That's one conversation. A bot will make that same mistake in every interaction. And if you think about how many interactions they are handling on a day, that's just scaled up massively. So it's super important to get that criteria in place. And this is one that I think there's a huge amount we can talk about in this. There's always that kind of train of thought where you think that's something that I can work on later on. But my advice to be in the fix for this is build that AI criteria, that evaluation criteria now, get ahead of it because the gap only gets harder to close the longer you leave it.
Absolutely. I mean, run it if you can as part of your pilot as well. You need to understand how things are going to scale, how its accuracy potentially matches or doesn't those of your agents. So, there's a lot to unpick.
Oh, definitely. And there's different methodologies behind it because ultimately when you are running QA on agents as an example, you're developing that human, and that's always funny differentiating between humans and AI bots, but that's the world we're in now. But when you're measuring the human element, you're developing that and you're coaching that. AI agents are fundamentally different because those pieces of feedback, that's not coaching, that feeds into configuration changes. Do we need to change workflows for the chatbot? It's the same methodology, but a different audience, I guess, and different outcomes in terms of
Yes.
improvement. But the key thing is you get that insight in order to know where to make those improvements rather than hearing about it in the news or a quick Google search.
Yes, and your PR team may not thank you for any crisis
Well,
communications that they might
yeah.
have to do off the back of that. Right, I'm very conscious of time. We have two questions in the chat. What I am going to do is move this along here. So very, very quickly, for those of you hanging around, if you've enjoyed what we've talked about in this kind of format, we are running a further 3 sessions. You can find direct links to them in the resources tab in Zoom. It's sort of down there in Zoom's quite messy toolbar, but you'll also get these in your inbox after this session as well. So feel free to sign up for those. We'd love to see you there on these different topics. But whilst we've got the time, so 14:29, Chris, we've got to rapid fire do these. So we've got a question. When you do a calibration, how long does it usually take before the changes are applied to new tickets? What's the typical or most accurate time frame? Based on my observation, it seems to be between 24, 72 hours. Is that correct?
It's a good question. I wonder when we're talking about calibration though, I wonder if this is talking about making changes to prompts. Because that, just when, and Onada, just correct me if I'm wrong in this, but it feels as if that's what we're talking about when we're talking about calibration in terms of you make the change, how long does that then apply to the new tickets? Making changes to prompts, brilliant, thank you. So yeah, in that case, when you make the new change, you publish that new prompt, that should be then getting applied to every conversation from that moment it's been activated from every conversation in there. In terms of a 24 to 72 hour delay, I'm not sure specifically on that. I believe it would be instantaneous, but that's one that I can check out. I can check out that.
See what level of delay there could be.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And We will just stick around. It is 2:30. Those of you who need to drop off, you may. What I will do is collate kind of any questions that we haven't been able to get to, and we'll share those out with everybody, like with their answers via email as well. And we'll also send a leave behind of everything that we've talked about today. So I probably should have said that at the top. I hope nobody's been making frantic notes on things, but no, we will definitely be sending you assets shortly after. So Kaylee, we'll take your question last. In your view, is QA of an AI agent typically more successful if it's done by a human or a QA bot? So QAing the QA.
That's a great question, Kaylee. In my view, it very much depends. The accuracy of the AI is only as good as the configuration it's being done by the human. So on the assumption it goes through that testing phase and you're happy with those results, it will ultimately score in the same way as a human, but just scaled up massively. There's no way a human can get anywhere near 100% coverage. We know this. We're lucky if we can get like 0.5% coverage when it's purely humans that evaluating those conversations. So based on that same methodology, you calibrate your human agents, you write your prompts and test them thoroughly, and you have that confidence, then that ramp up will give you a really high level of accuracy. So it's kind of like a yes, but sort of kind of answer to that one, Kaylee.
Always annoying, isn't it? Getting a slightly "it depends" answer from people, but so often it is. It's like down to the subtleties.
And I think I know we're kind of slightly over, but just that's part of the journey is that configuration piece because, and from my point of view, I always find that quite a satisfying process when you write the prompts, you see the results, you get the results right, and activating that and putting it out live. That's a little journey in itself, and it's satisfying because then when it's not right, you know exactly where to fix it.
Brilliant. Well, Chris, I feel like this has been a tour de force of 32 minutes. We are slightly over, so thank you for bearing with us, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me quiz you and ask you all of these things about these kind of typical things that derail AutoQA programs. I know it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but I hope people have found it useful. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure. That's the thing. Each one of these could be a webinar in itself. There's so much in them, but I hope we've covered the main elements of each of them.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, everyone. As I've said, you will get assets in your inbox shortly before the end of the week. Thank you so much for joining us on our first of the summer series, and we will see you hopefully in 2 weeks for the next one.